of what is a memorial service. There are some in here who believe that memorial services are at best unnecessary, and that we should have shown our appreciation to the deceased while they were alive. Well, I believe that a memorial service provides us an occasion to draw a community closer together, if only temporarily, so that we can collectively acknowledge the importance and fragility of life. These services can be for mourning a life taken too soon, or for celebrating a life well lived, or something in between. We may cry or laugh or be passive, depending upon our connection to the deceased and our current state of emotions. Crying emotional tears are uniquely human. They draw us together, show that we share similar emotions, and that we may be vulnerable and need support at times. My Uncle Tom is part of my life, as he was part of the lives of each one of you here today. I think of him as being a gentle and simple man. Some of you may have seen a different side of him. And while some of us share common experiences, most of us have our own very individual and personal remembrances of him. I'd like to share with you some of the things that my sister and I have shared with my uncle. The day after I heard my Uncle Tom had passed away, I was at my yoga studio where I practice a few times every week. The teacher suggested that we dedicate our yoga practice to someone in our lives, and I chose to dedicate my hour to my Uncle Tom. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the yoga practice, it can in some ways encompass an entire life cycle. It typically begins in child's pose and ends in Shavasana, which is corpse pose. So, as I began in child's pose, I thought about my uncle and his very impish sense of humor and how he loved sweets. When we were little, Hostess Twinkies and Ding Dongs were always in the cupboard to be doled out either by him or my very indulgent grandma. I also remembered how gentle he was later in life and how he adored my nephew Jeremy and was always plying him and later Elise with sweet treats. In horse pose, I remember that he could also be stern with us as little girls. Once he scolded us and made us get off of our Uncle Art when we were all piling on his back, making him as horsey rides around the living room. In cat pose, I remembered how there always seemed to be a skinny cat or two or three skulking around the yard, waiting for him to share his leftovers, and they were never disappointed. In eagle pose, I remember him bringing out the binoculars, and we would watch the woodpeckers for hours flying in and out of the trees surrounding his home. And how he would collect the black walnuts that fell from his tree and crack them open in the winter for all the birds to enjoy. In sunflower pose, I remember that he loved flowers and that he tended his peonies, his iris, and sunflowers, and once a couple of marijuana plants. He tended them with care, and how he was always encouraging us to dig up some peony roots and take them home to plant in our own yards. In warrior pose, I thought how only later in life was he able to share with us his wartime experiences. The last time I saw him, he recounted with awe the feeling that he and his buddies had felt in seeing the ocean for the very first time, and their delight in their very first swim. He also remembered and recounted to me how he had received cantaloupes from home. They were such a rare treat, and how he and his buddies tried to eat them up before the aroma completely filled the barracks, and they were forced to share them with others. In tree pose, I remembered one summer there were these giant green hornworms that were hanging from the ash trees, and he brought out his pellet gun and started shooting. And managed to get a couple of those leaves too. In plow pose, I remember him and I, as I was driving the tractor for him while we burned weeds. Well, I almost knocked him off the tractor as I was shifting gears inexpertly on the old tractor, but he didn't yell at me like my daddy would have. In fish pose, I remember how he loved to go fishing and how he frequently gave us these packets of totally unpalatable frozen catfish. We would take home, graciously thank him, and then throw them in the trash. Later, he used to give Jeremy and Elise numerous fishing poles and lures when he decided that he no longer wanted to go fishing. Finally, we finished in Shavasana, and I thought how late in life he would question why he was still here. I would always say something to him like, excuse me, I would say something to him like, your time hasn't come yet. And he would always say, shit. But I knew he was ready to move on, and as I lay on the floor, I felt gratitude that his time had come, and that he was released. So in my mind's eye, I told him I hoped that he was finally able to rest in peace. I could hear him say, shit. And then smile. So while I cry, my tears are not tears of sadness for his passing, just tears of gratitude for this gentle man. On behalf of the Fujimoto family, thank you for being with us here today. And if any of you have some Tom Fujimoto stories to share with us, I invite you to do so right now.